go. Recording. So we have a die class. Let's go ahead and create a cup class. So. Clicked away. So again, if we take a look at our plan of attack, our cup class has dice. It has multiple dice. We're going to be able to roll the said dice. We're going to look at the dice, add the dice, and remove dice. Well, let's think about the easier ones. Well, dice, that we can just, that's just an collect. That's just a variable. That's a parameter. We're able to hold the dice. We also want a count of dice. Roll dice, that's a method. Peek's definitely a method. Add dice is a method, and remove dice is a method. It might be nice to start with dice, add dice, and remove dice to start. And then add the other ones later, because that's kind of the standard thing. So let's start with that. So we know those are going to be simple, and we know these two methods, all these methods rely on the dice, and these two allow us to, if we're thinking of how to approach this, if we're thinking of like, well, what's the easiest thing I can code that I can then use? Well, creating the cup and then adding and removing dice are probably the easiest things I can do, right? I can very easily add and remove dice to it. So let's start with that. So we got public, oh no, private, sorry. And if we want to hold multiple dice, what do we need for that? What should we be using?
A list.
A list, right? We can, it's dynamic. We can add or remove things without worrying about the size. That's the easiest item to go with. So let's do a list. Dice. Oh, sorry, list. All right, keep hitting K. Die. Dice. There you go. Brings in the new item. The first thing is, whenever we bring this cup into existence, let's say we're going to play our game of Lairs Dice, is there a kind of a standard for this game that we talked about? Is there a standard initial starting point for how many dice you're going to have? This is something we do need multiple cups, right? We're going to need multiple cups. We're going to be able to instantiate a different cup for each player. And so we're definitely going to be able to construct this item. So we definitely know we need a constructor. What is that constructor going to do? Minimum is going to initialize the dice. So I don't know why I did that capital, by the way. Equals new array list. We know that the constructor needs to at least do that. Initializes the list. So it's an empty cup. It's a cup. It exists. It's a cup that can now store dice. We now initialize this cup to store dice instead of liquid. So anything else we can do during the initialization when we instantiate this cup? What else can we do with it? Any ideas?
For line 12, did we also initialize the amount of dice we're going to have inside the cup?
We didn't yet, did we? Remember, array list, we don't have to tell it how many, but we can give it dice, right?
Yeah.
So we could do that, right? We could, during the instantiation, we can also give it the starting 7 dice, right?
Yep.
And if we really wanted to be dynamic, we could accept how many dice we want in the cup to start. So we could even do int dice num as how many dice we want to start with in the game. So whenever we bring a new player in, how many dice do they start with? Now we can do for int counter equals 0, counter less than dice num, plus, yeah. We're just going to go ahead and add and create a die and put it in our cup. Add, right? Yeah. What was our die need? Did we need anything? Nope. We didn't need parameters to do it for it, did we? Nope. We had a default die with 6 sides, starts at 1. New die. And now we have a cup. So far, so good.
Mm-hmm.
Good. All right, so a cup, that's nice. Let's do some of the easy items. Let's do a public add die. I'll just do dice equals dice.add new die. And so this is not like adding any specific die from the location. We're just creating it. Whenever we add die, we just want to create a new die and put it in our. All right, now how do we remove something from a list?
I don't want to be Captain Obvious, so I'm just gonna search it up.
No, go for it. If you think you know what it is, like there's and now if you're gonna search it, though, what are you gonna search for?
What do you
If
mean?
you're gonna search, what is the search query you're gonna use? Because there's a terminology for removing something from a collection.
Shoot, I know it's on the tip of my tongue.
Because let's say we wanted to remove something from an array, for example. If we had an array and we wanted to remove something, thinking back to JavaScript, what were some of the ways we could take? Yeah, we had pop, right?
Yeah.
And so a fair item to do a lot of times actually to just Google search what you know of an item in another language in Java. So searching for array list, Java array list pop will actually give you the equivalency. The array list does have unique naming standards.
Mm-hmm.
Java does have array.push, array.pop. No, sorry, Java doesn't have push. I don't even think it has pop actually. Now that I think about it, might not.
I believe it does, but it's with the linked list.
Right.
class.
That's right. Yep. It's with the linked list, which is technically still not an array. It's still technically a list. So, but yeah, those methods that we used to push, pop, shift, and unshift. You can use add and remove on the array list to get that similar behavior. So array list.add we know adds to the end of the list. We have pop, which will remove from an index, a specific index. So pop is going to be used in this case, not like we used to use it before. It doesn't pop used to remove the last element. Now there's nothing that says to remove the last element specific. You have array list.remove. However, to remove the last item, you can always just do remove the last index. So you always just say that remove the last one. So in this case, we have to do array list. We're going to do dice.remove. In this case, we're going to do dice.size -1. And this will give us the index of the last die. So we can do that. We can also just say, you know what, just remove the first element by just doing 0. And this one would require less math. So which one do we want to do? Which one are we going to do? Remove 0, remove the first element, or remove the last element? What do you think? Does it really make a difference other than how we get that number?
For me, it would make sense just to remove from the last number, wouldn't it? Because I mean, we're going backwards on that one.
Kind of. So the one thing that's interesting about array lists is that if you remove something out of the array list, it shrinks the array automatically, right? It automatically kind of readjusts the array. So this would be something we have to wonder about is in our array list, if we remove the first index, is it going to then go through the array and have to push everything over by 1? Or is it just readjust the location of the array? So think about it this way. If we have, like, let's say, a stack of plates, or let's say we have a collection of things, we have X, 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 Y, Z, A, B, C. And so we have these, and technically they're all in a box. So we have a box. This is where you're getting into kind of the nitty gritty. Overall, in an interview, you probably wouldn't care too much about this for an opening position, but these kind of things are just interesting things to think about. So if we remove something from an array, let's say we remove the C, look how the array is now created, right? If we pop that C out, we still have the empty spot here. So index 2 would now just be empty, right? Would now just be null. That's not what we want usually when we remove something, do we?
No.
when we remove something from, like, let's say a line, like if we're in a line in a store and someone steps out of line, let's say C is me, I'm Cliff, and I step out of line, everyone else is going to move up, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what we expect to happen, right? And now at the end of it, we have an empty box at the end now, technically. If we have that empty spot, if that blocks or that box is still
Oh, so it'd just be
maintained.
the same situation. Okay.
So that's what we would think would be happening, that everything would shift over automatically, right? When you pull something out of the middle, we expect everything to automatically shift over. What I didn't show happen though is that in code and like in other situations, what actually happens is that everything has to actually physically move. So when I left and I moved out of line, I didn't remove the box. What happened is that X then took a step forward, right? Then Y said, oh, hey, let me move forward. And then Z said, oh, let me move forward, right? And then eventually I come back, I'm like, oh crap, I lost my spot. I'm now in the back again. But you see how there's that processing of that each thing had to take a step forward in the list, right?
Yeah.
And so that's something you have to be careful of when adjusting arrays. If we undo for a second, go back. If I remove from the end, I can literally just do that and the line is fine, right? If I remove from the end of the line, there's nothing that has to be adjusted, right? No one has to move in order to fill up the gap, right?
Mm-mm.
It's at the end of the line. If I remove from the front of the line, I technically have a gap. So we get to ask, so if you really want to get technical with things, you have to know, well, how does the language handle this? A language can do one of two things. The language will be like, oh, the front one's empty, so let me just reassign where the address exists, where the collection exists, and I just delete that location. Nothing moves, nothing shifts, everything's good. However, in other languages, what'll happen is that, yeah, the system will be like, oh, hey, we have an empty spot, and I have to make sure my indexes are correct, so let me move each item up one by one. I'm going to move B over now. Now I'll move C. Now I'll move X. Now I'll move Y. Now I'll move Z, and then I'll delete that Z. And so some languages do that, and that causes processing, doesn't it? So off the top of my head, I can't remember what Java does, but this is why, even though this looks simpler, putting in the first index, we don't have to do any math. Doing dice.size -1 could, in theory, actually use less memory and less processing, because it's going to remove that last element and it's already good to go then, right?
It's actually pretty cool, not gonna lie.
Interesting, right?
Yeah, because it kind of
So-
it's more obviously more technical in it.
Mhm.
I feel like it enhances your computational thinking, just like
And it's something you
always
can think
understand those kind
about.
of scenarios.
And the other thing is just knowing these concepts can help you to think of other solutions for algorithms that you come up with later on. So
Yeah.
think about how things happen and really make sure you're understanding that very, very specific step-by-step actions that take place in code and in your solutions. So that's part of the reason why I do want to do those things and why I show those things, because it helps me remember when I'm creating a solution, I have to think about the very specific step-by-step instruction. So that's one of the reasons why I show that. It's like computers are very, very step-by-step. I have to do each action one by one. And so very good to know, but it can help you again do, the more you know that, the more you realize it, the more you recognize it, it can affect your solutions you come up with. That's what we do with the remove dice. So yeah, you're right. So in the long run, Hector, yeah, you're right to be able to actually choose to remove the last element in the array, not to remove the first one, because we save ourselves from having to do that shift over, and instead we just jump to that last item. Yes, we have to do a little math here, but what are one of the things that computers are really good at?
Doing the math for you.
Yeah, computers are pretty good at math. So we'll let it do the math really, really fast and get it going. Awesome. So we have add dice and remove dice. That's nice. Let's go ahead and I went to close these. Let's go ahead and close all these down because we don't need them. I'm also going to create a main class inside of Lairs Dice. I think that's what I want, right? Yep, good. And then public static void main. Yep. Oh, like that, actually. Let me just that. we pulled that. I remember what that was. Look at that. And there. Cool. So in this case, let's go ahead and we'll instantiate a cup. So cup, cup, one cup, cup, and we'll say we need 7 dice. Cool, we have a cup. Wait a minute, I want to look at I have the dice, I have the cup, it has dice in it. But how do I can't view any of the dice, can I? I do cup dot dice. Oh, sorry. 1 cup dot dice. What happens? Why is it red?
Dice is private.
Yeah, right. It's a private item. We need to be able to access the dice, and that's what Peak was going to do for us, right? Peak was going to let us look at the dice in our cup. So I guess we have to do that one left in order to at least allow us to do something with the cup. So let's look at that one next. So look for Peak. This is going to print a string, so we'll actually just have it print. So let's build the string though. So we're going to do some string building. So we'll do string output. And what we want to do is we want to print out each and every string, right? We lost. Well, sorry, we're recording though. We want to print out each and every die. So what should I do? How can I print out each and every die?
Use a for loop.
All right, which kind of for loop?
For each.
For in.
For in, there we go. Yep, for in. Remember, for each is a lot different in Java. So go ahead with for. Die and dice. Yep, not in.
Oh yeah, I didn't use the right term for it, that's why.
Yep. For in. Yeah, for each is an actual method. For var die and dice. Someone else. Someone else just dropped. We lost Cullen too.
He says he's gonna restart us then.
Again?
Yeah, he says he's having some issues.
Oh, fun. I get that you see the chat. Well, it's a good thing I'm actually recording then. 7:31. Yep. All right. Peak. I'm going to do output equal I dot get value. Add a space. The last thing we'll then do is do a s out output. Most likely what we'll do is we'll eventually turn this into a string method, return string, because again, the cup really shouldn't be in charge of actually displaying. We want to be able to return the string and let however it wants to display. Right now, we're forcing our cup system to be used only with a console system. So we're telling it that it has to use the console because we're using system.out.println. Instead, if we turn a string, our method could actually be brought into a internet page, like an actual website application where we return a string of the value of the dice that could then be printed via HTML or whatever system that can then work with a string that way, however you're displaying the data. So this is where, again, that's why we usually have that console class eventually. So we'll do that later though. But for now, I want to do this just so, again, I want to get us to run the program again and actually do some stuff. So back to our main class. Now we're going to do cup.peak. See what we get. So run it. I'm on the wrong main. Let's do this one instead. There we go. Well, I get 7 ones. That's interesting. Let's run it again. Yeah, 7 ones again. What's happening?
We gotta roll them.
All right, we didn't roll it. So we got our cup. We didn't roll it. We could roll and instantiate, but really we should have a method to roll them. So we're going to need to roll them more than just when we create the cup, right? This is something I want to do fairly often. So let's do public void Roll. Now, in our previous game, we actually had a roll all method. Do we need a specific roll all method, or in this case, is roll good enough for us? Is there ever going to be a time that we're going to want to roll an individual die in Lairs Dice?
There can always be a scenario for that. Can
Really?
there?
Can you think of one?
I'm still not fully cultured with Lairs Dice. I'm not sure if that's actually correct answer.
Right. I'm going to tell you no. There's no point that you're ever going to roll a single die. Because how the game works is you roll the dice and then you play with that set the entire round. Once that round ends, you roll all the dice again, and that's your next set for that next round. So
Okay.
yeah, unlike Yahtzee, where you can pick you're picking and choose individual dice to roll. In this game, you're always rolling the entire cup. You're always shaking the entire cup. So in this case, we're just going to do a generic roll method. That's just going to take each die and roll them. So same thing we just did before. Var, die, dice. Die dot roll. And that is it. I need brand, right? Dang it. Oops, admit. Just do this. Make our life easier. Cool. We'll do that. Yes, let's see if this allows us to now actually get some new stuff going. So back to Dice King's main. We don't need that one anymore. We need this main. We're now going to go ahead, peek. We'll then do player one cup dot roll and player one cup dot peek again to see if it actually did change. Let's see. So far, so good. Let's do it again. Let's actually do it here again. Roll and peek a couple times. It says the main class has to already follow the actual process. There we go. We got our first cup that had all ones. We then rolled it once. We peeked and looked at it. We rolled again, peeked and looked at it. Rolled again, peeked and looked at it. That looks like it's working, right? Looking good. Let's test out our add a dice and remove a die. So after this roll, we'll go ahead and do player one dot add roll, add die, and we'll peek. We'll then roll. After peek again, and then we'll go ahead and do player one cup move die. And we'll keep again and roll. We got a new die. This one we didn't roll that die. Note how we rolled. We then added the die and peeked. So we didn't roll that added die, did we? Did we remember that? We rolled the die, we added it, and then we peeked. We didn't roll that new die we added. Let's shift that up one. So we add the die before we roll. Actually, no, we should already do that down here. And this. Do another peek. Just want to see a couple rolls with the new die. Let's see that. And so, our die, we roll and peek once with our normal set. We go ahead and add the die and roll again, then peek. We then roll with that extra value again. We then remove it and peek. And we see how these two didn't change. We removed that number 5. We removed the 5 die. Looking good. Do it a second here just to make sure it actually moves. And actually add 2 die. That's fine. You don't beat that one anyway. 2 die added, 3 die lost. Any questions on it? That looked good. Back to our plan of attack. Take a look. Got our dice. These worked fine. We added, we removed, peek, and we can roll them. And that kind of that's what we need out of our cup class, right?
Can I see the peak one more time if you don't mind?
Sure. Yeah. There we go, peek.
Oh, okay.
All good?
Yep.
All right. Back to ours. Back to our plan of attack. The next thing we're going to create is the player class. And I'm going to create part of this, and I'm going to give you the challenge to try to create some of this for Thursday. And based on this, we should actually be able to complete this probably by Thursday. So we're going to create some player, and then I'm going to leave one of these, and I'm going to have you guys validate or do something with it. So do class, player. If we look back here, we have the player needs the cup, get claim, get decision, validate, claim, and is out. Well, we could probably also add one more thing to it. What other parameter could we add to the player? I have to think of something. What other parameter might belong to the player? Or to each player? That would be different. Between, let's say, Hector, if you and me were playing, can someone tell me what would be the difference between me and Hector?
The
Name?
dice they roll.
Well, the dice we roll, which is why we have the cup. I think I heard someone else say it.
Name?
Name, right? Me and Hector have different names, and we need to know whose turn it is, right? You know, to say, Cliff, it's your turn, or Hector, it's your turn, right? So that could be useful. Let's go ahead and do that quick. So push all these down and do name as well, just make sure we have them. So make sure we store the cup. We have a name for them, and then we have these. All right. So first up, private up. Private ring. So public player, when we create the player, so any information we need or that's not game specific when we create the player. Just for the record, this is a trick question. So what do we need to create, or what do we need to accept for each player that is not provided by the game? We know the cups for the details for the cup is, there we go, name, right? Same thing, yep, name again. Who is the player that we're creating right now? Their name. Then cup, we're just going to go ahead and instantiate a new cup. You know, the default is 7. Something you could do, just so you know. Oh, right. So again, this is the idea of the static number. Someone else can be maybe like, why 7? What does 7 mean? Instead, I'm going to be able to just do this number instead, and that way people know what's going on here. It's a little more legible and more English. This helps with your code smells and code readability. So again, this is the idea of a static. It's not going to change. It's not a final. It's a constant. So very, very useful item, and makes this a little more legible for some random person coming in that doesn't know what we're doing. If we were to bring in a new student from another cohort in, they could look at this and be like, oh, I know what this is. Okay, I kind of get what's going on here. So new cup, and we're providing it the number of dice. Got it.
Wait, is there a difference between static and final?
Yes, final also means that nothing else can change it too. So a child class can't change it. This is the final instance, this is the final version of it. They're similar, but there is a difference. So static is also something that can't be changed. Final is the idea that once it's set, it can no longer be modified.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, you can do a final without setting it. And it also can override, I believe, parent items as well. So saying this is the final version of it, you cannot modify it going down. So, definitely a good item to know the difference. So glad you mentioned that. Definitely make sure you can explain the difference between static and final for an interview. Player. All right, we have to have the option of getting claim, getting decisions, validate claims. Before we do that, we need to be able to interact with the cup, right? So here we get these player-specific actions, We also have the actions for the cup, right? The player needs to be able to take on. And if you remember correctly, cup is private, right? You need to allow the player to perform certain actions as well. So what can the player do during their turn? We know that they can make a claim, but what else can they do? If you're thinking about the player physically sitting at the table, what could you do if you're playing the game? Go on, think about it. You're playing Lairs Dice with me. What are some of the things you as a player are going to physically do in the game? And not at any specific time. Just what are some actions you as a player are going to do at some point in the game?
Hide your dice.
Yeah, you're gonna hide them, but we already,
Oh yeah, the copy.
yeah, they're kind of already hiding them inside the cup, so that kind of works. So, but that is true. You will hide them, but there we already have. I think we already have that built in with the cup system, so we don't need a method for that. What else are you going to be doing? Well, before you hide the dice, what do you do with them? Anybody else? If you're unable to speak and you want to use chat, you can do that if you think you have the answer. Silence that. I'm being captured by the
Is it-
recording.
Rolling the dice inside of the cup.
Oh, you got to shake the cup, right? Or roll the dice, right? So you can do that. That's one. So you do need to shake the cup. So we could always do a shake class if we want to. Shake method. What else might you do as a player? So you did say, so Emilio, you said hide the cup, but you might have an amazing memory, but are you going to remember throughout the entire round what you have?
No, most likely not.
So you're probably going to do what during the game? We're going to end up looking at your dice again, right?
Yeah.
You can do a peak variation here. What's the last thing you're going to do as a player in the game Lairs Dice? When it's, let's say it's your turn.
Guess the value of the dice.
And you're gonna make
Between
a
both
claim,
ways.
right? Yeah, you're gonna
Yeah.
make a claim. You're gonna make a claim. And we also know that at some point you are gonna have to decide if lying, if other player, yeah, if lying. Decide if call or play. We'll say that for now. So those are the four things we know that our player physically does in the game. So let's go ahead and do first one, public. And one thing we can very easily do here is just kind of pass the method through. And so in this case, what we're going to do is actually just going to do public roll. And all it's going to do is do right, cup.roll. This is called a pass through. Void. This is the same method name and just calls a private composition classes method. So use the same method name and calls it over. That way, instead of making cup public and doing player.cup.roll, now you can just do player.roll because they only have one cup. Okay, the other thing you can do here, if you really want to, if it makes sense for you can do shake cup. This is fine. If you're readability, that's fine for you. But this is a common practice you'll see is that private submethods or private composition objects. So again, this is composition. The player has a cup. It isn't a cup. It has a cup. This is composition. We don't want to be able to give full access to that class outside the method or outside of player. So we don't want to make cup public because then we can just change it all together. We can roll at any time as long as we have access to the player class. So that's dangerous. And so we want to do those. We want to allow the roll method from cup to be able to pass through to the player so that we can roll as the player. Make sense? So now we now have access to this roll method. It'll make a little more sense as we go forward. So we have that. We're also going to do void peak. Peak. And that'll be it for that. All right. Make claim. Now in this case, we want to get from the user two things. We want a value of dice and a number of dice. So we want two integers from them, right? We want two integers, and we want some restrictions on that. So let's take some notes and think we need to do. We need to get from user two integers, one for die value, 1-6, and one for amount. And one thing we do here is we could try to restrict it to 1 to 14. Of course, if they're claiming that there's more than dice available, that's their fault. If you want to, you could try to say max dice if you really wanted to, but that's not something you have to do. Think about it in the real world. Could you technically speak out loud as a human? Oh, there is 10 threes, even though you're sitting at 5 dice and the other player has 3 dice left, right? You can say that, and that would technically be your fault for forgetting how many dice the other player has, right? That makes sense? There's a total of 8 dice in the field. You just said there's 10 threes. Technically, you can allow that, even though there's no possible way that's true. The other player is going to instantly say you're lying because there can't be 10 threes as there's only 8 dice in the game. Of course, that means that the other player does have to know that you only have 5 while they have 3. They have to be also keeping track of how many dice you have. So I say it's really fun to say that you can have a maximum of 14. But even then again, this is one of the things where I'm saying you don't necessarily need a maximum, but this is something we definitely might want to have implemented. A way to ask for numbers and maybe even have a restrictive number of the system. We can always add this later, but we definitely want a way to ask for 2 integers. Let me look at this console app, this console method we came up with again. If we look at this quick, we have a get choice and get choices. But they're too specific to our current game, isn't it? This is getting an int, but it has the text there saying pick a die between 1 to 5 to reroll, doesn't it? So this is very specific to dice games, to our Yahtzee game, isn't it? So we need to make something a little less specific to Yahtzee, maybe. Maybe we should make a new console one. We should probably rename this to Yahtzee console. That's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to refactor this because you can definitely tell this is very much a Yahtzee console, not a generic dice game console. I'm going to have you guys create instead, and this is going to be your challenge for Thursday. You're going to create the console, the actual console class that is for any dice game that we can use. And so here are the methods you're going to want to. I want you guys to. The one method I want you guys to think about creating. Int, get int, min, int, max. This is the method you're going to be asked to create. I'm going to return 0 for the time being, just that the method is fine and happy. So this is what I want you guys to create. A method called getInt that runs in the console. It takes a min, max, and a string query. And what should happen is that when you call this method, it should print to the console the query, and then accept an int, and then validate that the int is between min and max inclusively. Does that make sense? So example, if I was to do get int 0, 1, 1, and 4. Number. Output would be I want number for console. And the user should enter whatever they enter. If they enter a 1, it should re-ask. Sorry, not 1. If they enter a 0, it should re-ask for a new number. If they enter 5, re-ask. If they enter a 2, accept. And return the 2 back. And return true. Return 3. Return 3. That sound good? Makes sense what I'm looking for? Any questions on this? All right, so remember, I can of course share this now with you, go to, not that. Back over. Record 11. Put this right here, bring this down, this will have the code, so that way, got it. This is the repo, bring it down, you'll have the empty code there, go ahead and fill that out as best you can. And we'll review it tomorrow, Thursday at the start of class. So start of class, we'll try to start class at 6:30 next time. I'm gonna try for 6:30 this time for Thursday, since we'll have everybody there. And the first part of class will be to review what you come up with. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right, if you got any questions, of course, you can post them in Slack. You are open to work in with a team, you can work with someone else if you want to. I don't think this one's going to be complicated, difficult enough to need it, but it's kind of that first exercise.
Yeah,
Sound good?
I'm gonna try to restart Lairs Dice. Do you mind just posting the recording today or tomorrow morning?
That's my goal. I'm going to enter in this now so that way it starts processing. I'm going to try to upload it by tonight.
Appreciate it, Cliff.
No problem.
Awesome.
When did my camera turn off? Oh, when I reconnected, it didn't auto turn on my camera. That's weird. Hi, everybody. So, all good. I will see you all on Thursday.
Yep.
Have a good night.
Take it easy, Cliff.
See ya.